Okay, so this is sketching these reciprocals. I'm going to consider what this looks like. So if I had y equals x, x minus 2, that's a parabola with an x-intercept at 0 and at 2, and we'll have a turning point at 1, and 1 minus 2 is going to be negative 1. Okay, so if I'm now going to consider the graph of the reciprocal, I'm going to, where this is going to have an x-intercept, I will have an asymptote at x equals 0 and at x equals 2. And because this is going to infinity, I'll also have an asymptote at y equals 0. Okay, so when I have x equals 1, y is going to equal negative 1. If I turn that into 1 or negative 1, it ends up at negative 1. So 1 and negative 1. I now know that as this gets closer and closer and closer and closer to 0, this is going to approach negative infinity. So end up with a curve that looks like this. And as this is getting close to 0, my reciprocal is going to approach infinity, so I end up with a curve looking like this. And I need a second point. So if I say 3, on this curve up here, when x equals 3, 3 times 3 minus 2 is equal to 3 times 1 or 3. So that's 3 and 3. Therefore, on my reciprocal, I'm going to have 3 and 1/3. Asymptote, asymptote, turning point labelled, 2 points labelled. Looking at k, I need to consider what x squared minus x minus 6 looks like. So that's x, that's 3, that's 2, negative on the 3, positive on the 2. Therefore, that's going to be a parabola that will have x-intercept at negative 2 and 3, and it will cut through at negative 6, and it will have a turning point at dead middle 1. So, is that 1? No, it's not 1, it's a half. So a half squared minus a half minus 6 is going to be 1/4 minus 2/4 minus 24/4, which is negative 25/4. So that point down there is at a half and negative 25 on 4. Therefore, the reciprocal will have asymptotes at x equals negative 2, x equals 3, and y equals 0. And where this had a y-intercept of negative 6, that's going to become a y-intercept of negative 1/6. Where this had a turning point at a half and negative 25 on 4, that's going to be a half and negative 4 on 25. And my curve's going to look like this, approaching that asymptote, and of course here, and of course there. And I've got 2 points labelled, I've got my asymptotes labelled, all is good. And looking at my third one, x squared plus 2 never cuts the x-axis, goes through at 2 as being its lowest point. Okay, so if I'm looking at sketching m of x, when x equals 2, that's the lowest point that this is, that's now going to equal 1/2. And that will become the maximum point. As this gets bigger, the reciprocal is going to be smaller and smaller and smaller, and approach the asymptote of y equals 0, and the same on the other side. Since I need a second point, I'm going to consider when x equals 1, I'm going to have 1 squared plus 2, which is 3, so that's 1 and 3. Therefore, that's going to be 1 and 1/3. 2 points labelled, asymptotes labelled, that is the graph of m of x.